Formed in 1967, ASEAN, or the short for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, is a regional group which promotes economic, political, and security cooperation among its members. The group also emphasizes mutual respect and non-interference in other countries' affairs. With the total population of ASEAN countries reaching up to 615 million people and a combined gross domestic product of $2.8 trillion, ASEAN has played a central role in Asian economic integration. ASEAN economic growth of GDP in 2018 remains broadly at 5.1%, driven by strong domestic demand and investments. However, Southeast Asia as a sub-region in Asia still on track, and inequalities among its members, not only limited to economic approach, but also climate, education, sanitation, and others, which admittedly due to lack of access. Lack of access should remain a setback to overcome, saying that this region has not been successful in reducing inequalities, reflected from the Progress Report of Sustainable Goals Development Achievement up to 2017. UNESCO publicated that Southeast Asia has struggled within years for reducing suicide mortality, improving access to safely managed drinking water, and also improving oceans health. Compounded with differences in its multiculturalism, inequality has to be left unchecked to fulfill ASEAN's future in 2030 under the SDGs. ASEAN Youth Initiative Conference has started annually to initiate for ASEAN youth empowerment who have an interest in the ASEAN region along with the SDGs. With inequality as one of the major issues in the world, it will be one of the topics of AYIC 2020 to be discussed. To support the development of ASEAN, a door or road must be opened to improve access so that inequality can be reduced. The viewpoint from ASEAN, particularly the untapped youth, are needed to achieve greater impact of the SDGs. This opportunity will give youth enthusiasts to know their own value add through their contribution towards the SDGs.
Hello everyone, greetings, good afternoon. Welcome to the second webinar of ASEAN Youth Initiative Conference 2020. I would like to say thank you to all of you for your enthusiasm. There will be quite a big number joining us today, so thank you very much for your participation and attention. It is an honor for me to introduce myself as the Master of Ceremony for this webinar. I'm Amara from the Faculty of Dentistry of Padjadjaran University. I will be leading this event for the next several hours ahead. So nice to meet you all, everyone. Before we start this event, I would like to read the rules of this webinar. This will be quick, so bear with me, everyone. First, we sincerely hope all participants will continue to attend the webinar session until the very end, followed by filling out an evaluation form that will be shared at the end of the event to get an e-certificate, which will be sent to participants' email. Second, participants are expected to stay in the room unless there are connection problems. Third, participants are not allowed to turn on audio during material presentation. That will be all for the rules. I sincerely hope every participants are able to follow them all. Next, we will listen to the greetings from the project officer of this year's ASEAN Youth Initiative Conference. Please welcome Milani Hartina.
Good afternoon, everyone. To the distinguished guests, speakers, and moderator, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to welcome you to the second pre-event of our AYIC webinar on the theme of Reduce Inequalities, the Impact of COVID-19 Outbreak on ASEAN's Economic Inequality. I am very grateful for our speakers, Prof. Arif Ansori Yusuf and Ms. Pinkan Audrin, for taking time off from your busy schedule to attend this important webinar. I wish to thank Ms. Ratu Givana Zila, the most outstanding student at Faculty of Economic and Business Padjadjaran University, for agreeing to moderate this webinar. It is also an honor for me to welcome our distinguished guests and to this great team that make this webinar happen today. According to the ASEAN Policy Brief, the coronavirus have a negative impact on ASEAN's economy and that of the rest of the world in 2020. Key sectors have been affected, particularly travel and tourism, and retail and other service sectors. Business operations and supply chains disrupted, employment and livelihood put at risk, while consumer confidence has declined. The COVID-19 outbreak has diminished prospects of an economic recovery from a broad global slowdown last year. In ASEAN, the pandemic has so far brought immediate disruptions in economic activities across the region, as evident in the decline in tourism flows, disruptions in air travels, and weakening the consumer and business confidence, as several countries imposed lockdowns, community quarantines, stay-at-home orders, temporary business closures, and travel restrictions or prohibitions to contain the virus. The purpose of this webinar today is for us to be aware of our region's economic condition, to open our eyes that the world is not in the best condition during this outbreak, also to give us an information regarding what to do to help and save the economic condition to our country during this condition. It is time for us as the youth of Asian countries to give solution and develop action to help our region to rise from the brink of recession during and after the COVID-19 outbreak. I hope we can get as many insights as we want from today's webinar, and I hope you guys excited and enjoy as we are happy to conduct this webinar. I am Mania Tinabawa, Project Officer of AYIC 2020. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Milani, for the incredible speech. Next up, we are going to invite the chairman of the Student Executive Board of Padjadjaran University. Please welcome Rizal Ilham Pratama.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Amara. Good afternoon, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's my pleasure today to welcome all of you in this webinar. We will talk about the impact of COVID-19 outbreak on ASEAN, actually, and especially in economic inequality. When we talk about COVID-19, many people said that COVID-19 widening the gap of inequalities in the world, especially in ASEAN. While the rich people can stay at home, work from home, or even ordering food from application easily. But the poor cannot eat easily. They have no sufficient food. They still need to work outside their home. And when we talk about the ASEAN context, when COVID-19 emerged in early 2020, Southeast Asia is not on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Even though the Southeast Asia have strong economic growth, but this sub-region or this region have high level of inequality, low level of social protection, and a large of informal sector. When we talk about COVID-19, they were larger gap between the rich and poor. The social protection is lower level because we had a social restriction policy that meant the people to stay at home. The health, economic, and political impact of COVID-19 has been significant across Southeast Asia, but the virus has not spread rapidly here as in other parts of the world. But in Indonesia today, the virus spread so rapidly, I think, because the number is still rising. The health and economic and political impact of COVID-19 here is different than the Europe because we have a different, I'm sorry, something. Okay. Hello? Hello? Am I clear? Hello?
Yes, you sound clear.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So I hope this discussion, I hope this webinar can give another perspective to solve the problem, to solve this COVID-19 handling problem. Because I think in Indonesia especially, our policy about how to manage this crisis, manage this pandemic is not that good. So we need the youth to take part in this crisis time. And I hope this discussion will be a fruitful discussion so we can give another perspective, a good perspective to take part in this crisis response. So thank you all. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All right, thank you very much, Rizal, for the astounding speech. There are definitely very interesting points there. Well, it certainly is going to be an interesting webinar with a very special topic, reduced inequalities, the impact of COVID-19 outbreak on ASEAN's economic inequality. Well, this webinar will be supported by our expert speakers. Next, without further ado, we will jump onto our main agenda, the webinar itself. This webinar session will be led by a very special moderator, Ratu Giva Nazila Ramdiania. Before we start, I would like to read the very packed CV of our moderator today. She is a student at the Faculty of Economic and Business at Padjadjaran University, majoring in Islamic economics. And she's not just an ordinary student, she is awarded the most outstanding student of Faculty of Economic and Business UNPAD 2020. She's also been awarded the first winner of numerous paper competitions, as well as numerous papers that have been accepted on international conferences. She's also currently interning at Bank Indonesia. I think that will be enough introduction for our moderator, so see you on the next session. And without further ado, please welcome Ratu Giva Nazila Ramdiania.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. I'm Ratu Giva as the moderator of this session. Today we're going to discuss about the impact of COVID-19 outbreak on Asia's economic inequality. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. For the first speaker is someone I personally admire for his research. He is Professor of Economics, Department of Economics, Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Padjadjaran, Visiting Professor, International Development Institute, King's College, London, United Kingdom, Honorary Senior Lecturer, Crawford School of Public Policy, the Australian Crawford School of Public Policy, the Australian National University, Australia. Honorary Senior Lecturer, Crawford School of Public Policy, the Australian National University, Australia, non-resident Senior Research Fellow, United Nations University World Institute for Development Economics Research. His field of research include economic development, especially on poverty and inequality, as well as on the interlinkage between economy and environment. And we are so fortunate to have with us Professor Arif Anshari Yusuf.
Udah mulai nih?
Hello, Professor. Yeah.
Hi. So I can start.
Yes, of course. The time is yours.
Okay. Thank you for the chance, yeah, for me to share some of my view about inequality. But before I begin, so I have my slide combined with my video. So please full screen, make full screen the video that's coming from my side. So because I'm not going to share slides, but I combine the slide with my pictures. So, but I will share the PPT when we finish. Don't worry. Okay, so I was given a task to talk about inequality, especially in relation to SDG, yeah? And then how it may be related to the crisis that currently happening, yeah, in Indonesia. But before we go to those aspects about the crisis, let me refresh everyone about the SDG itself in terms of the history. Okay, so some of you may know this already, that SDG is actually an extension of MDG. It may be a coincidence, but MDG has 8 goals and SDGs has 17 goals. So the difference in terms of number of the goal is 9. So if you read about the Hinduism tradition, yeah, in terms of numerology, number 9 is very special. It's a kind of completeness, yeah, perfecting numbers, or penyempurna, yeah, is in Indonesian language. But let aside this coincidence, what is actually the difference between MDGs and SDGs? I will offer you my explanation, my view about this. I think the difference between MDGs and SDGs can actually be represented into one word. What is that word? Well, let me explain first, okay, before I come to the final conclusions. So if you can see here, actually, if you go to MDGs to SDGs, the difference is you add specifically dimensions of inequality, which is this one, yeah, reduce inequality. So we add one goals, which is inequality. Okay, so that's first the difference, and then the second one is you emphasize equality elements, yeah, in all of other goals, not all, almost all other goals. Yeah? So in other aspect, like for example, education, yeah, and then affordable energy, or even decent work and economic growth, if you look inside the goals, it means, well, I mean the target and the indicator, you will see that they also include some target that specifically emphasize of distributions. So what I mean is, if in the MDGs, the target is only, for example, to increase the enrollment rate of senior secondary school, for example, yeah, by, let's say, by 20%. Okay, but that's for overall populations, yeah, on the average. But in SDGs, it is specifically say that the goal also has to target certain group of the population. For example, the target is the bottom 40% of the people in one country, in terms of education, has to increase by this much and this much. So it's emphasized the equality elements, or no one left behind, yeah, in SDG language, in many more goals. Yeah, for example, the SDG number 4, yeah, which is about education, is actually say that to ensure inclusive and equitable quality of education. So there is an element of inequality very strong. So SDG actually has given more equality flavor into SDGs. And then what are other addition or emphasis, yeah, on SDGs? The other is to expand more in terms of the environmental sustainability. If you see here in MDGs, you only have one goal, which is number 7, in terms of the ensuring environmental sustainability. But in SDGs, you have at least 5, yeah, environmental related goals, which is number 13, number 14, number 15, yeah, and then number 11, even at number 12. This all related to environment. So so that's basically is sustainable development. Because when we go back to the report that was taught, I mean, that was commonly known, yeah, as the definition of sustainable development. Sustainable development is defined in this report called Brundtland Report in 1987, which actually say that sustainable development is development that meet the needs of the present. Yeah, so make sure in the present people get the needs, yeah, that they require, and then but without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So in conclusion, that one word that make SDG different from MDG is equity. Equity, if you look up in a dictionary, is what is defined as economic fairness or economic justice. So that's equity. There are two kinds of SDG, two kinds of equity that SDG emphasize on. The first one is what is called intra-generation equity. Yeah? Intra-generation equity means you have to make sure everyone, the bottom 20%, the richest 20%, the urban people who live in urban area, people in rural area, yeah, male and female, okay, that intergenerational equity. But when we talk about the generation, the future generation, our son and children later, our children and grandchildren later, to make sure that what we have now, for example, from getting out of all of our natural resources, will also be enjoyed, yeah, by our future generations. And that's what is called intergeneration equity. Yeah? So, but both of them are equity. So that's I think one word that represent very clearly, I think, what is the difference between MDGs and SDGs. So that what is equity, or in Indonesian language is keadilan. Okay? And it is important. Why? Because in most cases, in most situations, the people that are left behind is not proportionally represented. Yeah, the poor normally they cannot say much. They don't have much to say in terms of the aspect of voicing their concerns. Especially our future generation, that is not represented in any of our parliament, any our political system, because they don't exist yet today, but they will exist only in the future. So they don't have someone to represent them now. Yet the decisions that we make today will affect them in the future. So some of us has to think about them, and this is where SDG are important. Yeah. Okay. And why equality or inequality is seems to matter, and then have quite large influence on the SDGs, because inequality tend to increase in recent years, in almost any places, or in many places, in developed countries, in developing countries, especially in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s. This is what happened, for example, in many regions in the world. Well, you can see from the picture, many of the inequality, many regions in the world experience quite significant increase in its inequality trend. This is the share of national income of the top 10%. If you can see, for example, in Russia, in 1990, the top 10% national income share is around 20%. Now it's almost 50%. In India, in Europe too, the tendency is increasing. And this picture is also quite interesting, because the horizontal axis is actually the income group. The 10 mean the 10% poorest, 99% mean 10% richest, 99.99% is top 1%, 0.1%. So this picture, so from this here to here is actually the bottom 50% of population. So if you divide the population into two groups according to their income, so the bottom 50% of the income is here. Okay, and then this is the top 10% income. Top 10% income. As you can see here, the bottom 40%, the bottom 50% income during the period of, I think this is around, it's in 80 or something, 80 to 90, I have to check, but the most recent, increase only by this much, on average. Top 1% increase quite a lot. So the economic growth that was experienced in the recent times, actually was benefited almost double by top 1% compared to the bottom 50%. But top 1% only a few, right? Only a few people, 1%. But the bottom 50% is maybe 2 billion people. The top 1% is 1% of the total population. So 1%, the richest 1% of the total population get 20% of the economic prosperity. But the 50% of the population only get 12% of the increase in the prosperity. Okay, we are talking about the whole world. So inequality indeed is an urgent issue. And here in Indonesia too. And it's in Indonesia too. So especially from the period during the decade of 2000s, from the early 2000s to today, Indonesia experienced the dramatic increase in inequality. In fact, if you look at the data, yeah, during that period in the year of 2000s, actually the increase in Indonesian inequality is the largest in the world. So for example, from Indonesia, from the period of 2002 to 2013, yeah, for example, yeah, the inequality increased by 20%, yeah, and that inequality largest among any other country in the world during the same period, yeah, in Indonesia. So inequality is really a big issue in Indonesia and many other world. Why we need to be concerned? Why we need to be worried? Well, first of all, because naturally inequality is a socially undesirable situation. I don't think anyone wants to live in a very unequal world. It's socially undesirable. Yeah. And also, inequality is actually bad for economic growth. Yeah. Why? Because economic growth is driven by innovation, by know-how, by technological progress, by human capital. And the development of human capital is not a friend of inequality. Why? Because innovation will flourish in the country where more people are educated. Yeah? If only a selected few people educated, but the majority of other population are not that educated, you cannot expect much innovation from this kind of unequal society. Yeah? When everyone has engineering degree, of course, they will have more innovation. Then a country where they have only 100 or 1,000 PhDs, yeah, yet no one, but the rest of the population never experience any higher education. Yeah, and also inequality reduce social mobility. Social mobility means if your parents poor, then definitely you will be poor. That is a low social mobility. In the low social mobility, so this is not fair. Yeah, not fair. How can your life is determined by your parents? Yeah. Some people said, well, then it's normal. No, it's not normal. Yeah, unless people can select, people can pick their parents. People can choose their parents. If people can choose their parents, okay. This is your mistake. Why you choose your parents? But no one, yeah, can choose their parents. So our parent is a result of someone gamble on us. Yeah. So when people can, when people destiny depends upon their parents' condition, then it is not good for the society to be too much relying on those kind of situations. So we need to protect these people, yeah, from being unlucky because of the background of their parents. Yeah. And then another one is a country where inequality is high. Normally, they also have difficulty in translating their economic growth into poverty reduction. If your economy grow 10%, but the economic situation is very unequal, most likely the poor won't get benefit much. Yeah. And the last one that I think also very important in terms of today's issue is inequality is actually a breeding ground for identity politics. People like Donald Trump, yeah, and many other politicians in Indonesia too, actually they use inequality to divide countries. Yeah, to divide countries. Donald Trump divide countries by looking at the immigration policies, yeah, Brexit, also in Indonesia, religion-based politics, religion post-politics, identity politics is actually rooted in the inequality. People becoming more radical in terms of the religion, actually simply because they see injustice. They see an economic injustice. Why are people so rich that they cannot even eat every day? Yeah. Okay. So this is the implication of inequality. Okay. Now what about the COVID that we are experiencing now? Well, COVID-19 will undoubtedly increase poverty, but poverty is SDG number 1. Yeah? My colleague Andy Sumner and some of the other, for example, predict that the pandemic will bring almost 400 million people into extreme poverty globally. Some colleague in Semeru, for example, also estimate that Indonesian will experience 16.7% poverty incidence compared to 9.2% last year. So the poverty impact of COVID is enormous. But poverty is not the same as inequality. Yeah? What about inequality? Will inequality increase too because of COVID-19? Most likely, yes. Yeah? Well, not all literature agree, but 80% of the literature, the recent literatures on this aspect find that COVID-19 will definitely increase inequality. Why? For example, in the first study, workers who are not able to work from home typically earn lower wages, and they are more vulnerable when you have lockdown. Yeah. And then another study suggests that low-income earner has suffered more job loss than top-income earner. Yeah. People who has less education. Okay, so most of the study, there are a few studies that suggest otherwise, or at least natural, but in general, they find that inequality increase because of the pandemic. What about in Indonesia? Well, we have a paper analysis that. But before that, let me share this picture. So poverty increase in Indonesia, but maybe I should also mention that the characteristic of the increase in the poverty is actually a bit different. Yeah, why? Because the increase in poverty, the biggest increase is in the region and in the province or in the region that is characterized with large urbanization. Yeah, for example, in Java, as you can see here, in Java, the increase in poverty is 1% to 1.2%. It's quite large. Yeah, and this is only in March. This is the data, only in March. And 1% increase in poverty in this region is quite big because the initial condition is around 5 to 6%. Yeah? An increase in 1% is quite many. And then what about inequality? Well, there are signs, not a good sign, that inequality increase in the time of the pandemic. This is the most recent data that I have. Why I'm quite convinced about this? Because let's say for the last 6 years, inequality has a slow tendency toward declining. Only in the last 6 years. Not much, but there is a tendency. That's the line, yellow, the yellow line there. However, during the pandemic here, this tendency seems to inflect, and there's an inflection. So if something can deflect the strong declining trend. So there's no other explanation except this is the COVID impact. Yeah. So the data suggests, the recent data suggests that inequality in Indonesia, especially in the region that is more urbanized, yeah, like Jakarta, West Java, or all origin in Java, tend to increase, the inequality tend to increase in the early period of the pandemic, yeah. But this is only March, but we have not yet the data until today because it's quite not difficult. I mean, take times, yeah, to get the data. Okay, and then for that reason, then we did some studies to analyze this data, yeah, to check in a more rigorous way, you know, whether or not there's a tendency toward inequality in Indonesia. I'm not going to explain this because it's a bit too detailed, but our analysis suggests, but the premise of the analysis is something like this. Maybe I can explain to you in a little bit more, you know, like in a more simple way. So our premise is like this: if the effect of COVID-19, yeah, on economic growth is smaller than the effect of growth, is smaller than the effect of economic growth on poverty. In other words, the impact of COVID is greater on poverty than on economic growth. Economic growth is actually the effect of income on average of the population, right? But poverty is the effect of COVID on the poorer part of the population. So we have the data on it. So if the effect of COVID, yeah, which is represented by the reduction in the mobility, yeah, is greater on poverty and then on economic growth, then we may conclude, yeah, that the effect of COVID is inequality increasing. Why? Because it affects the poor larger than the effect on the non-poor. And then the analysis suggests like that. So if you see here, this is the effect of COVID or mobility on poverty, 2.2 minus, and this is the effect of COVID on economic growth, only 0 point something, and inequality also increased. So we can conclude that every 10% point of mobility reduction due to COVID-19 is associated actually with 1.9 percentage point of increase in Gini coefficient between September 2000. Yeah? And then here, a 10% point reduction of mobility, yeah, in workplaces, I mean, mobility for people to go to work, is associated with 21% increase in poverty incidence growth. Yet, the effect on growth only 2.8%. Yeah? And then we find urban area also more poverty sensitive. So basically, we conclude that COVID-19 crisis in Indonesia will increase inequality, yeah, from the early observation. And then we also try to find what may explain this. And then we find that the explanation rests on the situation that region where many workers cannot work from home. Yeah? So the more people cannot work from home, the more that region increase inequality. Yeah, the effect. Yeah, so it related to the fact that people who can work from home is actually people who are relatively richer. But people who cannot work from home, they are poorer. Yeah. So suddenly they cannot work, they don't have income. Yeah. And also there are many people who depend on mobility sensitive sector, such as ojek driver, yeah, taxi driver, supir angkot, yeah. That's mobility sensitive sector. That mobility sensitive sector is is very sensitive, vulnerable to the COVID impact. So that's related to those, yeah. Let me, so maybe I better to continue with this. So what to do? Yeah. What can we do in terms of this? There are many things we can do. However, I want to emphasize on how can we manage to anticipate the effect of COVID, and how can we make sure that the recovery from the COVID crisis is also good, it will not tend to increase inequality. So what I mean is, this is something that we don't want. Yeah? Existing situation here, this is pre-COVID, yeah? Pre-COVID crisis. In a pre-COVID crisis, they are already increasing. They are already gap in terms of the inequality. So skilled worker, big business, yeah, and is a lot richer than small business, informal worker, and unskilled worker. So this is the gap between the rich and the poor before the crisis begin. Yeah, when crisis happen, the tendency is this group of people who are already poor, they experience largest decline in their welfare compared to the rich. Yeah. What we don't want is, after the recovery, actually the rich get more compensated than the poor, and the poor is not compensated enough. Will this happen? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Because, for example, people who are expelled from the job actually cannot find their job back, for example. But the companies gets big stimulus from the government, for example. If you read about the 2008 financial crisis in America, actually the stimulus package that was given by the government, yeah, actually enjoyed mostly by the CEO of companies rather than the people who are unemployed. So this is something we don't want, but it may happen. So it means that the crisis itself already increased inequality, and then the recovery also increased inequality. Yeah. So this is something we don't want. We have to make sure this doesn't happen, because otherwise that will increase inequality. What we want is something like this, at least. Yeah? So at least everyone get full compensation, get back to their initial conditions. The poor get full compensation, the rich, okay lah, they also get full compensation, yeah. And the inequality come back to its pre-crisis period. At least this is what we have to get. However, there is also opportunity, yeah, because, for example, the government spent 600 trillion rupiah for a stimulus package on the pandemic. If we properly spend this and think about how to distribute this money, yeah, in addition to anticipate and mitigate the COVID crisis, also to reduce the already existing problem of inequality, then we prepare something like this. Okay, the poor can, the rich can be fully compensated, get to the pre-crisis level. However, we may give the poor more. So in that case, even though our COVID crisis affect the poor more than the rich, but the stimulus package, the mitigation that we do to recover from the crisis, increase the welfare of the poor a lot larger. That increase the welfare of the rich. So at the end of the day, after this crisis over, yeah, during the recovery period, we may end up with inequality that is lower than before the COVID crisis. I think this is something that we should aim for, yeah, in terms of this COVID-19 and its relation to inequality. So I may want to end here. So give you things to think about how can we get something that most preferable uh, to to us. Yeah. So then we may have a discussion on this later on. So let me end, and thank you again for the opportunity to share. I will return the microphone to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Arif, for your outstanding presentation. And now we're going to the second speaker. Come to us a bright and young researcher. She is currently a junior researcher at Center for Indonesian Policy Studies. She also has experience as research trainee at Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, coordination intern at United Nations Resident Coordinator, cooperation intern at International Office Parahyangan Catholic University, coordinator of the Bureau of Rapporteur General of Diplomacy and Practice. She has some publications, one of them entitled Mitigating Food Supply Chain Disruption Amid COVID-19. Please welcome Ms. Pinkan Audrin.
Yeah, thank you so much for the moderator to the brief introduction. And I also would like to thank the AYIC for the opportunity and for inviting Center for Indonesian Policy Studies to join in this pre-event in the second webinar. And my name is Pinkan Audrin, and as already mentioned before by the moderator, I'm currently working in Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, and today I would like to share some of our insights in this issue. So related to the webinar, can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perhaps I just like to full screen first. Yeah, so first of all, I would like to share a little bit about the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies to just give a brief information to all the participants here. So we're actually a Jakarta-based public policy think tank, and we conduct research and also doing media outreach and social outreach, as well as public policy advocacy. And we have three research areas. The first of all is the food and agricultural trade. The second is a community livelihood, which include digital economy, as well as the economic opportunities, where I mostly belong in this research area. And the last one is about the education. And then we are in TIPS also produce several publication as well as a policy brief responding to the COVID-19 outbreak that we currently face until this moment. And also actively conducted several webinars to reach more participants and raise the awareness about the issue. And today, it's also interesting to hear about the Indonesian youth perspectives, as in the beginning we heard from, I forget names, Rizal, if I'm not mistaken, the one that gave a speech about the Indonesia's and ASEAN's condition at glance about this current pandemic and how it also impacts the people, especially in the two polarization of people. So for those who are in the good economy condition, they have more access to enjoy their work or education and even leisure at home. While at the other hand, there are a group of people that even hard to find their daily income. to secure their daily income and also to have some food for them to eat. So it's really a heart-wrenching moment that we have right now. And it is because of the impact of COVID-19 outbreak that we cannot avoid. So for today, I also would like to begin by sharing this overview of the situation that I combined from several resources. So as we can see here, the countries in ASEAN actually have a different situation in regards of the COVID-19 cases. So as you can also see from the graph here, Philippines and Indonesia becomes the top two countries with the rising number of cases starting from March until 30th of September. And for the other countries, it is way much lower, but still in the considerable conditions. I only put 8 flags here because it's the only countries that actively update their conditions, the economic condition and social condition in their official resources. But we also have Laos and Brunei, which combined from other resources, recorded way much lower cases being reported. It was 2 cases as of August 14 for Laos, and then 146 cases for Brunei as of 25th September. And then from these, we also can see that the total COVID-19 cases in ASEAN compared to the population actually still below the 1%, and it also accounts for 2.0% of global cases. So it's still a low number in paper, but if we are saying this from a human perspective, it's actually a quite large number of person that affected either directly for those who are contracted, and also indirectly for those who are perhaps not contracted by the virus, but their social economic conditions are highly affected. And then for the health, economic, and political sectors in this region, is actually have a significant effect from the COVID-19. And for the Indonesia itself, we see that it's quite rapidly increasing these past months. And yeah, the total cases even reached the number of 200,000 and almost 300. And it's really concerning for us. And for this, it's also affected, the number of cases also affected in the economy as well. So for the, under the flags, you can see the second quarter of 2020 gross domestic products. And for Indonesia, we have been contracted until minus 5.3%. And then in other countries, it actually, in ASEAN, it's actually way worse, but it's still not a really good number. So we still several things to do with that. And then we're next. Okay. Talking about today's topics is about the Sustainable Development Goals in Target 10. It's about the reduced inequalities. And from here, we see that the, oh, sorry. Oh, where's the back? Yeah, here there are several targets under the goals number 10 in reduce inequality. It covers reduce income inequalities, promote universal social, economic, political inclusion, ensure equal opportunities for all, and adopt fiscal and social policies, as well as improve regulations in global financial markets, enhancing the participation in the international institutions, responsible and well-managed migration policies, special differential treatment for developing countries in terms of trade, and also encourage development assistance for the least developing countries, as well as reducing transaction costs for migrant remittances. So these goals actually have the extensive targets that would like to be achieved by the members of the United Nations by 2030. But given we are now in reaching to the 5 years after these global goals, we still have around 5 more years to come it's around 10 years to come. And given with this condition of the coronavirus pandemic that hit the global economy, and also including ASEAN countries and Indonesia in particular, we also see there will be a challenge for countries to be approaching this goals target. So yeah, there's a glance of information which about inequality itself. I think Professor Arif already gave the comprehensive information and how it really affects us as a nation, and also given in this situation of the coronavirus pandemic, how it's become really a concern for not only for the government but also for us as a citizen. And then now I would like to share about the Southeast Asia overview of the SDGs. So here I get this from the UNESCO report in July 2020, and from this they actually listing out the all 17 goals and do the comparison for the year of 2000 and 2019, and how we are progressing towards the 2030 targets or the sustainable development goals itself. And from this listing, we also can see what our friends Rizal also mentioned earlier, that we are still lag behind in Southeast Asia, and most concerning part is in reduce inequalities as the target that we are discussing today. And also for the goals number 16, it's about peace, justice, and strong institutions. And for this goals number 16, one of the factors would be the domestic situation or political situation in several countries in ASEAN region, which also having their own problems even before the COVID-19 hit us. So before the COVID-19 that widely spread back then in March 2020, actually Southeast Asian country has a lot more things to do to get the target in 2030. So given the current condition, it becomes more challenging for us, but it doesn't mean that we can easily give up. This information could also make us aware and re-strategizing how we can achieve that target. And still related to the COVID-19, I also found out the data about the ASEAN countries' COVID-19 preparedness conditions. So this is the data from still UNESCO, which a combination of the Human Development Index that annually produced by the United Nations Development Program, where they listing out and do the analysis of all countries in the world in terms of several sections. And then for this assessment, they see 3 areas that being assessed. So the first one is the human development, and then also health system and connectivity. And then we can also see the degree of preparedness from the color. So the red one is lower and the greener is the higher one. So from this, we can easily spot that which countries have excellent preparedness in what areas, and which countries also still working to improve that. So for Indonesia itself, we can see here that our number is categorized as low for the health system, especially for the physicians, compared to the other countries in ASEAN. Although we are not the least number, we still have Cambodia with the lowest number among the region. But still, there are only 3.8 persons per 10,000 people in Indonesia for physicians. And also for the health expenditure, we are actually allocating a little bit amount of money for this compared to other countries in the region. And for your information, the government of Indonesia's biggest expenditures still focusing on the security and also military sectors. So the area of health still have a lower budget allocation. And then other than that, we can also see that there are all green category for the connectivity. And this is much related to the all things digital that we currently do, whether we are studying or whether we are working. So actually we have the preparedness for that. But once again, as what Professor Arif also said, it's still difference from one region to the other region. So the reality of inequality is real. And then next, I will share to you also about the Indonesian response to global economic disruptions related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and still in terms of the SDGs targets number 10. So if you remember, I already shared about all the targets under goals number 10, and I only would like to highlight the 2 targets from there. So it's target 10.1, which is reduce income inequalities, and target 10.4, which is adopt fiscal and social policies that promotes equality. So from the first target here, we can see from the official statements from our governments, from the media reports, and also other sources that the government of Indonesia have a budget allocation for social safety net responding to the COVID-19. So when the first outbreak appears back then on 2nd of March, the government works a bit faster to respond to that. And we also have the pre-employment card, which is a bit, what to say about this one? I think this is also the thing that intended to help the people before COVID-19. But when there's a COVID-19 pandemic, the government adjusted their planning for the pre-employment card and include that in the social safety net responses, which in the beginning of the implementation, we can also see there are several discourses about that, where people say that they cannot access to register, and also there's just limited information they can access about that, and also many debates that's happening in our society about the pre-employment card. But it is still one thing that our government also planning actually way before the COVID-19, and still working at that card up until this moment. And then the last one, also tax breaks and fiscal incentives in order to support the workforce. So it's actually also related to Professor Arif explanation before, that government have the stimulus package that's designing for supporting our society, but perhaps for the recipients, it could be more beneficial for only a small amount of our society, especially for the 1% in the highest income group in compared to the 50% at the bottom income group. So the tax breaks actually still need to be reevaluated and need to be more socialized. So the government also need to communicate what's actually they're going to do with that, who's the recipient, and how to register for those who would like to receive this stimulus. But for the broader aspect, we can also see that this will this intendedly help the companies or the business sectors to maintain their operational working, although there must be adjustments that needs to be happen because this is really an unprecedented moment, and hopefully it could also help the people who works there to still work there. But yeah, in the implementation, we can also see there's so many different cases about that. And then move on to the next target, is target 10.4. We also see that the government of Indonesia under the Ministry of Finance also recalculating the budget calculation and allocation for the fiscal year of 2020 and also adjusted for 2021. So I think it's around April or May when the government also informed about the restructuring of the budget allocation, and they give more budget for social protections. And during May, usually the government also prepared for the APBN for the next year, and then they put the economic recovery as one thing that would like to be emphasized in the budget allocation. And then the next point is about reducing Indonesia's interest rate from around 6% in the early 2020 to around 4 until 4.25% lately. I've checked the latest one actually a couple months ago. So this lower interest rate and also be supporting the society to encourage more spending and also transactions, so to keep the consumption flowing. And then the latest one is increased government spending to boost consumption, because as we know that 60% of our economy actually depending on the consumption. So when we hit by the coronavirus pandemic and there's a social mobility limitation through PSBB and other containment measures that the government from national and regional level implemented, it actually affected the people and also the economic condition for them. And we can also see there's a deflation for the last 3 months, which is the third quarter. We are having deflation, and it's a really different situation because usually we are having inflation. So it's a really interesting moment for us. And then the next one, I also would like to give a picture about the social economic condition. So in CHIPS, we are have more research about the food and agricultural trade, and also about the farmer's life and how it can also impact the food prices and how much affordability of the food for the people, because we are really concerned about that one. And back then we also conducted a webinar on these issues of social protection, and we did a research and found out that based on the statistics in Indonesia or BPS, there are a proportion of monthly expenditure on food from the total community income is different between those in rural area and in the urban area. So those who are in rural area, they spend more of their income, monthly income, for food. And The next one, we also can see that 62.14% of Indonesian food consumption still dominated by rice. And there are still minimal portions for consumptions of protein, nuts, fruit, and vegetables. So we really depends on rice. And as of September 2019, it's actually a year ago, the poverty rate in Indonesia reached 24.79 million people. And this is also updated, and there are a number of aspiring middle class recorded as much 115 million people. So it's related to the World Bank latest research, where they published in the first semester this year. So they found out that there are part of the middle income class and a lower middle income class that is vulnerable enough due to their condition. And the coronavirus pandemic also hit everyone, and especially put these 150 million people at more risk because they are already being vulnerable. And then we can also expect that the number of poverty rate in Indonesia could be increasing given the economic disruptions that happening here in Indonesia. So we can also be aware from the news that many companies already re-strategizing their operations, where they move to the digital sections and working from home situation, where several industry also lay off their workers. So many people being affected indirectly. And still related to the social safety net, the government of Indonesia is actually having a lot of social assistance program. So it started from a bansos reguler from the Ministry of Social Affairs, and then bantuan penugasan khusus presiden, then bantuan tanggap darurat still under the Ministry of Social Affairs. And for this, we in CHIPS also highlighting the non-cash food transfers, or PPNT, and see that actually this program expected to achieve at least five objectives. The first one, reducing food expenditure of the beneficiaries, and then also increase nutrient consumption, because as we know from the previous slide as well, that people in Indonesia still consume more carbohydrates, and then also improve accuracy in targeting beneficiaries of the social safety net, and provide options for beneficiary to manage their food needs. And the last one, help achieve the SDGs. So it's the last thing that also correlates with our discussion today. And for this matter, we also highlighting what's really interesting for the government to be considered related to the social assistance, because we see that it's one of the things that the government do to reducing the gap of inequality as the effect of the coronavirus pandemic that hit economy in our countries, especially for the poor. And then we see that although the government already have quite extensive programs and also more budget for that, there are three things that needs to be considered and put more attention to that. So the first one is about the data accuracy for recipients, because we also heard some news, we also read it in newspapers and even in the television that for the first phase of the disbursement, there's still a challenge for several regions in Indonesia to get the social assistance. So there are not quite lower income family, but they still get the assistance, while there are those who really in need but not counted as the recipients. So those things also happen in our disbursement, and it's really the matter of data accuracy. And then the next one is also about the availability and affordability of food commodity supply, because this situation also impacted the economy and also the income for the society and how they can actually able to spend their money that they have. And most of the things that really important is food, because yeah, it's the basic needs for the human rights. And if the government cannot maintain the availability and affordability, it can also um, uh, affected the poor harder than the other middle income or higher income society. And the last one is about the synchronization of national and regional government social assistance schemes policy. So it's quite related to the first point of data accuracy, but in here it's more about the disbursement process, because we also have several types of social assistance from in the wide range of a level, from the national and also local. So it's really important for our policymakers to understand that there needs to be a harmonization between the national and also the local system to actually help the people in needs and help to lowering the gap of inequality. And what other things that can also improve on that? So aside from the social safety net, we can also going a bit far from that to see the global value chain, or how can actually our country participated in the more extensive value chain. So it's actually one of the concerns also from our perspectives in the food security issues. So just one example between Australia and Indonesia. So there's from here you can see how two countries can contribute to producing the food that you can actually consume, and it comes from a very long period, and there are so many things happen. And from this, we can actually see that the global value chain, or GVC, is actually accounts for almost 50% of global trade today. And it's really interesting to point this out because we are a part of ASEAN countries where there are 10 members with a different situation, and also change to do the bilateral or even multilateral trade relations. So it's still a room for us to contribute to that to improve our economy. And the GVC itself can further boost inclusive and sustainable growth, create better jobs or more jobs even, and reducing poverty. So if developing countries implement deeper reforms and industrial countries pursue more open and predictable policies, hopefully this global value chain can also help as part of their recovery plan for the countries. And it's just a potential for Indonesia to tap in also in Australia, but in this context of this webinar, we can seek more our contribution in global value chains among ASEAN countries. And lastly, I also would like to, after I talk about more like, what is it? Perhaps the things that way more than our capabilities here, especially noticing that there are students here joining us today for the webinar. So what can we do as an ASEAN youth? So I think there are three things that we can do for that. So for the first one, it's really good for us to be aware of the development of the COVID-19, both in Indonesia and in our region, respectively, in ASEAN, but also not to forget that it's really easy for us nowadays to access information about the global situation. So by knowing what's going on in the world, it can help us to be more knowledgeable, and also knows which one is the right thing to do and which one is the right thing to do. So yeah, so keep updating your information for that. And I know all the students at this moment also easily connected, although we are separated physically, but still connected through social media and other stuff. So it could be easy for you as well to be aware about these issues. And then the second one is upgrade new skills during spare times. It's also related to what Professor Arif already said, that the coronavirus pandemic also affected the human capital. And from what I'm seeing, there's also a changing preferences for some companies, or even when uh, institutions would like to hire a person. It's become more competitive right now because there's so many people that being laid off, and they would like to seek other opportunities that's available. And at the same time, we also have students which are going to be graduated anytime soon, or already graduated and seeking for jobs. So to be more competitive to that, we can also upgrade our skills, and perhaps um, by doing that, we can also give contributions. So aside from our own benefits, we can also help others when we have upgraded new skills. I also have experiences in other webinars that we already conducted related to the social safety net issues, and found out there are many interesting youth-led initiatives to help other people. So it's actually similar with what our government doing with stimulus package, but it's more like in what is called like a social movement or social initiatives. And I also see several university students, the student council, they also conduct the what is called like social events to help the others who really in needs in the current pandemic situation. And the last one, we can also seeking innovative ways to contribute in economic recovery. By the first one, we can buy things from local SME businesses, or even from our friends that establish a new, what is it, like um, new small shopping for shopping. Perhaps they cook something, or they sew and sell what they are doing. You can also help by doing that. And also the most important thing as well is to adhere to the health protocols to help the government in flattening the curve, because without this action, actually we cannot also maintain the economic condition, because the root problem of our economic condition today is because of the coronavirus pandemic. So how to actually respond to that? We need to solve the health problems, and it also cannot be solemnly depends to the government, but it needs active participation from us as a citizen and as the ASEAN youth itself. And the last one, for more information about our works, you can also go to our websites. And during this coronavirus pandemic, there are several publications and webinars related to that you might also be interested. And last one, thank you all for this opportunity, and looking forward to the discussion session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Pinkham, for your presentation. There are a lot of interesting recommendations for us. And okay, now we have Q&A session, question and answer session. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your name, university, question into the chat box. Okay? So we will waiting for your question. Okay, is there any question? Okay, while waiting for the question, maybe I want to ask personally to Ms. Pinkan about data accuracy. That's a really interesting point about the recommendation for the government, right? The data accuracy. What do you think the government can do to improve the data accuracy? Because as we know that our government, especially every ministry, has their own database, so it might be not linear with each other. What do you think, Ms. Pinkan? Thank you.
Thank you, Ratu Giva, for your question. It's really interesting. Related to the first recommendation about the data accuracy, we actually would like to suggest that the government, the central government, especially under the Ministry of Social Affairs, can coordinate more closely with the local governments and perhaps uh, preparing the guidelines on how the local governments can do the distributions and also using their budget allocation for social assistance program, and then do the report mechanism in a timely manner, so the central government under the Ministry of Social Affairs can collect them in the same period of time, and then they could have the database from the all regions in Indonesia. So it could be easily to track which area that do they expand more or the from their budget, and also it could be synchronous with the data from the statistics bureau. So we can while we can see this year is also the year when BPS do the census. So it's really interesting to see the results later on, how our conditions in 2020, especially with the coronavirus pandemic that's happening, really affected our society. And besides from the data from census, we also can see from the beneficiaries of the social assistance that the Ministry of Social Affairs already collected, if they are pursuing that plan. And it can also be encouraged for the local governments up until the smallest level to updating their citizens' data, because as we know that our data still in different from one areas to the other areas, and also for the latest one, I think like it's a yearly basis. So for the 2020 itself is still in the calculation. So given the current coronavirus pandemic that is really dynamic and affecting our people, to do the approach, personal approach from the grassroots level, it could also help the Ministry of Social Affairs and the regional offices, the regional government offices, to have more accurate data in terms of those who are in needs of more support from social assistance. I think that's one thing that could be considered by the government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pinkan, for the answer. Okay, so now we have the first question from Wildan Shuruk from Universitas Padjadjaran. Question to Professor Arif and Ms. Pinkan. As mentioned before, based on the current data, it is found that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused the increase in inequality in Indonesia, because the restriction policy mostly affects workers who cannot do their job from their home, like Gojek driver, taxi driver, and other workers from informal sector like sopir angkot, pedagang, and so forth. Do you think that the big number of increases in inequality in Indonesia is due to the fact that about 50%, if I'm not mistaken, of the workers in Indonesia are from the informal sector? What do you think about that number? What do you think about that number of informal sectors in Indonesia? Is it bad or good for the economy? Because on one side, they can reduce unemployment, but on the other side, the informal workers, The informal sector workers tend to have lower wage and less resilience to shocks like the pandemic. And the last question is how to make them any better in the long run. Okay, that's a really interesting question. Maybe Ms. Pinkan or Professor Arif wants to answer.
Yeah, I think it's generally true. Yeah, especially when at least that's what we observe from the data from March Susena survey. In March Susena survey, we see that poverty increased a lot, despite the fact that in March the social distancing PSBB has not been even implemented yet. But the government has only started to encourage people to do work from home. And at that time, everyone nervous because at the start of the pandemic, people are still really scared. They don't really go out. People who can stay home, they stay home. People who can work from home. And then some people don't go out. But the government has not imposed PSBB yet. Yeah. So in that case, then even before the implementation of PSBB, why then the poverty already increased? I think it's quite simple because area where normally informal business, small business, operate, people gone. Yeah. So this coffee seller in the park in Jakarta, yeah, in many parks in Jakarta, there are small people with a bicycle, right? They're running around with coffee, kopi kapal api with thermos, right? So they rely on daily income. If the income for today, no, they don't eat. They have to get out, and suddenly no one there. So these are all informal sector. People suddenly don't take Gojek. People suddenly don't take angkot, yeah. So all of these people are many. Actually, this informal worker consists of around 40 to 50% in Indonesia of all workers. And for the last 20 years, this number has been stagnant. It's not improving. So yes, it is true. I think that's all one of the main reasons why the poverty, especially, and also inequality increased during the pandemic, because people don't go out. How to improve this? Okay. In the long run, if you look at countries, yeah, that is now we call developed, yeah, or high income country, they don't even have informal sectors. They have maybe, but I mean, if you think about informal sector, people who pay tax, yeah, and things like that, because everyone are formal. So when a country develop into high income countries, the informality will naturally decline. So in the period where you become lateral leaders, yeah, of these countries, you should not have this issue anymore. Yeah, but how the reason why, if you ask me, why the progress in terms of the reducing the share of the informal circles seems to be stagnating, there are many reasons. But one of the main reasons is because we are experiencing something called premature deindustrializations in the decade of 2000s. So beforehand, or before the 2000, people who come from rural area go to urban area, they are absorbed informal circle manufacturing. But nowadays, people who come from rural area go to urban area because in rural area they don't have land anymore, because people from cities take away their land, buy their land, and then they don't have land to farm. They go to cities, but in the city, the manufacturing sector decline. Why this manufacturing sector decline? Many reasons. One of them is global force. Because of China take away all manufacturing job in many other developing countries. Because China is a sleeping giant in 1980s. When Indonesia grew by 7% per year, China was sleeping. Yeah, when Singapore, Taiwan grow and make up what we call ASEAN economic miracles, China was sleeping. When suddenly China wake up, it's changed the game. Yeah? So manufacturing, many countries, they manufacturing decline, but this is not only the reason. There are many other reasons. Yeah? Indonesia is actually among the country that cannot take advantage the global dynamics in terms of the manufacturing. Just take one example. What is it? In my iPhone, most of the component in that iPhone was produced in several countries. Many countries contribute to the production of iPhone. This is called global value chain. Yeah? So almost a country that you can remember contribute to the manufacturing of iPhone, excluding Indonesia. So Indonesia also lost opportunity. So because of that, then people who come from rural area to urban area, they come to the city, suddenly found that cannot find good jobs. They cannot find manufacturing jobs anymore. So what they do, they go to service sectors. And this service sector is actually less productive than manufacturing. Not service sector in developed country like finance, yeah. No, but selling coffee on the park, yeah, in the park, Gojek, things like that. So that then we experiencing a tertiarizations of an economy, yeah, skip the manufacturing. So the manufacturing declined too early, yeah, and that's why we quite stagnant in this informality. So what can we do? Then we have to manage this process, yeah. So we have to, I think the no regret, yeah, the no regret policy is to increase the productivity of Indonesian workers, yeah, and also to reduce inequality so that people can have more opportunity to improve their skill, and then also to plan Indonesian young people's potential to become innovator, yeah, to become researcher, so that we can have more technology that can improve our existing production capacity. So that I think what we should do. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor, for your answer. And maybe Ms. Pinkan, do you want to add something for the answer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ratu, for the opportunity, and also for Professor Arif for the really comprehensive explanation about that. I truly agree with what you're already said, especially about the manufacturer sectors conditions compared to the service sectors. And yeah, nowadays you're also facing the downwards in terms of the workforce participation in the service sectors, because it's the one area that highly affected by the containment measures that our governments place at the moment. And related to the first questions coming from Wildan, I just would like to add one point, I think, to what already has been said by Professor Arif about the informal sectors. So aside from the nature of their work, they also have lower or smaller financial protection compared to the formal sectors workers, because we also know that more of the companies in Indonesia also encourage to provide the insurance for their workers, but for those in the informal sectors, they are not benefiting from this regulation. So when there is a crisis like this happen, they have more risk in terms of their financial condition and also the social protections. That's why they are the one that been targeting by the government to be the recipient of the social assistance. And it's actually one thing that would like to add it from these questions, and how to make them any better in the long run. Actually, it's not an easy task for sure for our government, but it's really need to be informed to wider society that there are several benefits or what is it like things that they can be accessed for them to help bearing with the economic conditions. And also similar to what I already said before, we can also help fostering their businesses, because especially the informal sectors, those who still run their small businesses can be supported when we also contribute in ordering things or buy things from them. Even with the current condition, I think the digital economy sector is also fostering enough. So although the coffee makers or the coffee sellers that usually we found out in the parks, perhaps they also change their work to some extent. And yeah, we can also help those who in need. Oh, and yeah, I think that's all for the first questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bintan. Okay, there's the second question from Alia from Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'd like to ask both speakers, in your opinion, as a youth of Asian countries, what should we do to decrease the inequality and participating in economic growth to prevent the recession? Maybe Professor Arif, want to answer it?
Sorry, what's the question again? Can you repeat slowly?
Okay. Wait. Okay. The question is, as a youth of Asian countries, what should we do to decrease the inequality and participating in economic growth to prevent the recession?
Okay, so yeah, I think the premise here is that in a country where inequality is worse will have bigger adverse impact from COVID. But a country that has lower inequality, they naturally will manage more. In many ways, yeah. In many ways, yeah. I mean, if in a country where you have very unequal society, then the access to help, yeah, is difficult for the poor. Very country where you have a pretty good welfare state, for example, in Sweden, yeah, in Finland, yeah, where they are quite relatively good in handling this, they are actually an egalitarian society. So everyone has equal access to health. So this pandemic, this crisis, I think give us a lot of lessons learned from this. That we should make sure in the future we have more egalitarian society in terms of many aspects, especially in the context of COVID, is access to healthcare. Yeah? So we have to make sure healthcare are available with the same quality for everyone. Yeah, and don't tell me that we cannot do it because we cannot afford. I think we can. The two ways we can do. First, improve our institutions, governance, because there are so many efficiency in terms of the managing financial resources in Indonesia. Yeah, if we can still find corruption everywhere, that means the money is there but stolen by someone else. They are not entitled to. Yeah, so we have to avoid this money to be stolen, so we can use it to give better health access for the poor. So more inequality. That's first. Yeah. The second one, maybe this is bigger. We have to improve the management of our natural resource, because that's where we are rich with. And the natural resource is very prone to plutocracy. Yeah? So people steal the royalty, get royalty, they are not proportional to what they should have earned. Yeah, because of backdoor negotiations and things like that. So we have to improve our institution, and by doing it, I'm pretty sure that we can. And third one is tax evasions. Yeah, tax evasion. Indonesia has a lot of rich people. We have 250 million people. If the 10% richest pay tax, better, we will have a lot of financial. So don't tell me we don't have the money. I think we do. Yeah? Just don't steal the money from the budget. Yeah? Make it more efficient and manage the resources that we have, and then use that money to give access to healthcare to everyone, and also make sure everyone get the same opportunity in terms of the skill improvement. And then mobility, social mobility will increase, and then we will be more ready, yeah, and more prepared if something like this happen again in the future. Yeah, that's my answer to the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for your question, for your answer. Okay, maybe Ms. Pinhan, you want to add the answer?
Yeah, thank you. So for the questions coming from Alia, I think I already said that from my previous presentation. So I also encourage for the ASEAN youth, especially here in Indonesia, that we could still be more knowledgeable about the current conditions, and also not only for the COVID-19 crisis itself, but also about the impacts that can come and affect the social economic conditions. So we can be more prepared in projecting ourselves for the future, because we will be the one that's affected by this crisis in the long run if we cannot handle this one properly. And then the next one, also the active contributions to the society by contributing in like small donations or the other charity things that some organizations or even the youth-led organizations conducted. So we can still share what we have with others. And then to help in terms of the economic growth, we can still doing the consumption, helping the consumptions in the economy by buying things from the small businesses or local products, and also while also maintaining our saving. So it's still one thing that might be considered for the ASEAN youth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Binkan, for your answer. Okay, there are still some questions in the chat box, but we're really sorry because the time is up. So we need to conclude our session today. Actually, a lot of insight and knowledge from our discussion today, but maybe I will summarize it into 3 interesting points. Okay, so first, inequality matters because 5 reasons. First, it's socially undesirable, but for economic growth, reduce social mobility, reduce effectiveness of poverty reduction, and breeding ground for identity politics. And equality most likely increased by COVID-19, and countries with higher inequality will be affected more by COVID-19. And what can we do? Okay, so the second recommendation for government. First, data accuracy for recipients, availability and affordability of food commodity supply, and synchronization of national and regional government social assistance scheme policies. And the third, what can we do as the Asian youth? First, aware of the development of COVID-19. Second, update our skills during spare time because now the labor market is more competitive. And third, seeking innovative ways to contribute for economic recovery, like maybe buying from the locals. Okay, that's all the conclusion for today's session. And now the Committee of Asian Youth Initiative Conference has some information for us. Without further ado, I will turn the time over to Amira as MC. Amira.
All right, that was a very amazing webinar session. And I, I certainly gained a lot of insight from this webinar session, and I certainly hope all of us did. Thank you very much, Professor Arif and Ms. Pinkan, for the incredible and very engaging materials, as well as our moderator, Ratu Giva, for the very, very interesting inputs. And thank you so much for everyone who asked a question. It's a shame that we couldn't answer all of them. Now, before we end this webinar, to get to know AYIC further, I would like to invite the Marketing Promotion Committee to present more information about the upcoming AYIC event.
Hello. Can you hear me, guys? Is my voice is clear?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I would like to say thank you to all the participants that have been joining this event. Thank you. And for all the speakers and the moderator also. We're going to inform you what is AYIC, especially AYIC in 2020. Next. So basically, ASEAN Youth Initiative Conference, or the AYIC, is a youth-based conference that is intended to enhance youth initiation in realizing the world target of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's held by BMKMA Unpad Universitas Padjadjaran. Next. So on this year, we focus on 4 SDGs. The first one is SDGs 2, Zero Hunger, and we have SDGs 3, Good Health and Well-being. And then we have SDGs 4, Quality Education, and SDGs 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institution. Next. We are committed to making an NYC accessible to talented youth and produce a good quality of aspiration that can influence the governmental policy through a strong partnership and scientific research approach. So we will have this scientific research approach that you have to make the paper, and we also will invite the government, the policy, so we will know a lot of new insight from this event. Next. What is the purpose of ASEAN Youth Initiative Conference? Why is BMKMA Unpad, why Padjadjaran University made this event? The first one is to build your friendship and network. As this event, you will meet a new delegate, you will meet a new speaker, you will get a lot of friends and broaden your network. And then the second one is to attract the best young people to study global issue. And the third one is channel your aspiration, channel your opinion, channel your idea to the world youth in national and regional and international scale related to the government. Next. I will tell you a little bit history behind the ASEAN Youth Initiative Conference. Please, next. So as we knew that ASEAN country, some of us are still lagging behind in progress of the SDGs point compared to other country, maybe compared to the USA or maybe the United Kingdom, we are still lagging behind the SDGs. But, well, actually, we have a lot of potential that we can maximize if we want to develop this potential. So AYIC is born and raise the major themes to strengthen and learn about this issue. Next. Building your friendship through nations. So in this event, you will meet a lot of new delegates, not from only your region, maybe on another country, that you can share your story with them. Next. This is the AYIC 2020 agendas. You will have opening ceremony and parallel paper presentation on day one. Opening ceremony is like a seminar. You will hear some knowledge. You will get new knowledge from the speakers, and then you will present your paper on parallel paper presentation. And then day two, you will have a full forum group discussion on initiative forum discussion. You will share your ideas, you will share your opinion about the issue that you raise from the paper. And then on day three, the result of the forum group discussion, you will make an action plan that will be released on public conference, and we will have a bonding night for the delegates and also the committee on the social night. And on day four, we have a special virtual trip. We will tell you more about Bandung. We will take you on a virtual tour on Bandung, and then we have a cultural night, or we can say it like an awarding night. Next. So what are the benefits of joining this event? You will encounter more knowledge, of course, and then you will buzz up your network as you will meet another delegate, and then you can see and position yourself as an expert as you make a paper and maybe share your idea, and then you will have fun and get a memorable experience. And the most important thing is you will get a certificate, you will get a change to paper proceeding, and AYIC 2020 is totally free. We have delegate testimonials here. This is from Tuong Hai, she's from Vietnam. Next. And we also have these testimonials from Bali and Jambi. Next. So if you have any further information, you can visit our social media or maybe visit our email as the presentation you can see. And next. You can also join our community group here. You can scan the barcode or maybe copy and paste the link. And next. That's it. Oh, we also have the AYIC merch. If you like, you can visit our Instagram on ayic.merch. And we already opened our final registration. So if you're interested, please join us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the information. As presented previously, the registration is now open, and we surely hope to see you again on the next AYIC event. Now next, I would like to invite the project officer of AYIC 2020 to give the certificate of appreciation for the speakers. Camila, please welcome.
Thank you very much for Prof. Arif Ansori Yusuf for being the speaker of today's webinar. Thank you, Prof. Also, thank you to Ms. Pinkan Audrin for being the speaker of today's webinar. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you for the opportunities.
All right, finally, it's a shame for me to announce that we're already at the end of the webinar. Once again, thank you very much to all the speakers and moderator, and thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts to each and every single participant. Thank you for your attention for those of you that have already joined since the very beginning. I also would like to remind everyone to fill out the evaluation form at the link in the screen soon in order to get an e-certificate that will be sent to your email. I hope to see you all again on another occasion. Until then, let's stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pinkan, and thank you very much for Prof. Arif.
Thank you, Prof. Arif, and also all the AYIC committee and all the participants.
Sama-sama, ya mudah-mudahan kita ketemu lagi.
To all participants, please enter this link in your chosen website and please fill out the form in order to get an e-certificate that will be sent to your email. Now, I would like to invite every participant to open their camera so we can have our photo session. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. One last time, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, thank you very much everyone for your participation. We hope to see you all again on another occasion.